Hi everyone, my name is Jennifer, and today I'm going to be talking about something very shocking, one of the latest episodes of the show Atlanta. The episode I'm talking about is called Big Payback, and I was like scared the whole time I was watching it. It's an episode basically about reparations, and it was a very it had a lot of Black Mirror vibes, and I know it's a work of fiction, but it's based on the ideas that some people actually believe in, this concept of reparations. And in this episode, they take it to the next level. They actually make it happen in the world of this episode, and it's actually happening. It's affecting people. People are coming for other people, and it's all kinds of crazies. But I'm also gonna have a special guest that's gonna be giving his input. I hope I'm saying his name right. His name is Kudwy, and he's from the channel Aporia Institute. I hope I'm also saying that correctly. And I wanted to bring him on and have him give his input because he has made a lot of videos about slavery and racism, and that's obviously part of a lot of the subtext and the context of the video and of the episode and the ideas promoted in this episode. But before we jump into that conversation, let me give a summary, a little summary of what happens in the episode. Obviously, this is going to contain spoilers, but here we go. The episode basically opens on following this white man called Marshall, just an average middle-class dude. He's divorced. Not divorced. He's separated. He lives in a small but nice apartment, like a bachelor apartment. And he gets his daughter every other day, and he takes her to school. He shares custody with his wife. So it opens. Well, I'm not gonna tell you every single point of the story, but basically he's living his life normally, and he hears on the news that some prominent executive at Tesla got sued by someone who was able to prove that executive's grandparents or grandparents once owned slaves, and therefore they argued that this guy's wealth, he owes it to them, right? Like to their slave owner's family. So I don't know how the lawsuit goes, but he ends up paying money to this person who's suing him. And so Marshall's like, wow, that's crazy. But he doesn't think much of it until it turns out that now anybody can check, using a DNA and Me type database, if a certain white person has a history of slave ownership, like if their great-great-grandparents owned slaves or something. And this is what happens to Marshall. He is at home with his daughter, like a 9-year-old or something, when this lady called Shaniqua comes and knocks on his door, and she has she's live streaming, and she's like, I'm suing you because your great-great-great-great-great-granddaddy owned my great-great-great-great-granddaddy, and so therefore you now owe me $3 million. She's suing him. Yes, she's Black, because obviously, in this episode, it's the Black people suing the white people for money. And I was just completely shook. I don't know much about the theory of reparations, but for me, it doesn't make sense, right? Because how are you going to be able to trace it all the way back? How are you going to be able to prove it? There's so many variables. So anyways, he gets sued. He gets really sad. He doesn't know what to do because this lady won't stop following him and demanding money. And not only that, it's one thing that she's demanding money, but for some reason she also sets out to ruin his life. She's live streaming and harassing him outside of work, blah, blah, blah. And he doesn't know what to do. He ends up hiding in a hotel. And in this hotel, he meets another guy who's also kind of hiding out for a little bit. He just gets up and leaves Marshall thinking about it. He gets up and he shoots himself. He kills himself. And I was like, wow, this is a major display of the ultimate ending of white guilt. I feel so guilty. I'm going to kill myself, even if I didn't do anything. That was really creepy. Anyways, we cut to the future, and Marshall, it looks like he has lost his job for some reason, and he now he's working as a waiter. And it turns out that now that he's working, every time he gets a paycheck, he has to pay a percentage of his paycheck as a tax reparations. So he has to say, oh, payee is Shaniqua, blah, blah, blah. And she gets 15% out of my paycheck. And I was like, wow, that's so fucked up. Like, to think that that could be like a possibility, or like, well, to think that people would potentially vote for that in the future. And yeah, let's play that conversation. So, here we are with Kudwy. Like I was asking him before we began, like, how do you pronounce your name? Because obviously I don't want to mess up. He's from the Aporia Institute, and they're doing great work over there. They churn out a bunch of content, and I knew that I had to at least ask you if you wanted to be in this video, because you make a lot of videos about slavery and racism, and they're all from an individualist perspective. So I knew you would be really as someone great to discuss this topic with. I was watching the episode last night because I watch Atlanta all the time. I wasn't planning on making a video, but once I watched it, I was like, whoa, what the hell is this? Like, this is crazy. I need to make a video about this, because yeah. So before we jump in, could you quickly, if, in case some people watching don't know your work, can you like tell us about your channel?
Yeah, so it was Aporia Institute. We just made it into Aporia now. We're just kind of a bunch of young teenagers. There's some adults there too as well, like very young adults. And we're just dedicating to like enlightening young teenagers and young adults into the world of ideas, making a path towards, reason, reality, selfishness, capitalism, and just kind of talking here and there about Ayn Rand's philosophy as well. But we love to talk about slavery, racism, reparations, like all of that, because apparently nowadays that's what people get like triggered about.
Right. Well, so I asked you to watch the video. I already in my intro gave a brief like summary. I tell the main things that happen, so we can just like really jump into the nuances of everything. So before anything, what's your initial reaction to the episode and the story? What happens?
So, I mean, as in the beginning, it was just kind of like, oh, like they're suing Tesla and stuff like that. And I was like, oh, here we go. It's going to be one of those things. Because I hear it all the time to people about reparations and white people need to do this and white people need to do that. So I was just kind of anticipating. I kind of knew where I was going. This kind of like neo-black philosophy or something like that. But towards the end, I was kind of really finding it disgusting a little bit. Because of how like explicit some of the characters became during the show. Like they're just on his the white guy's property, treating it like their own and stuff like that, and then chasing after him to try to beat him up and stuff like that. So it was like really disgusting towards the end. But overall, like I think it's good because I don't know, it's very entertaining, but it doesn't mean it's good. Like the message that it's presenting is like a good message that you should follow along and support.
Right. So let's go into the first topic. Obviously, this is an episode that it's sometimes at some points I'm like, are they advocating for reparations, or is this an anti-reparations? Like, because they portray the main character as very likable and you're sympathetic to him, but at the same time, like they're like, screw him, this is gonna happen to him anyways. So that's one thing. But like I said in my introduction, my understanding of the concept of reparations is very basic because I went to school in Mexico and it's not a thing there. But I understand that it's like, it's this concept that because the ancestors of Black people were slaves once, then the now offspring of white people who once owned slaves, like they owe these current Black people something. Like, what are your thoughts on this concept?
I think it fundamentally rests on a myth. And the myth here is generational wealth. It's essentially that because your white ancestors owned slaves, you guys got a lot of money and stuff like that, and that generation of wealth carried on, and you still have the wealth since slavery that some Black people nowadays need to come up and say, well, if my ancestors were enslaved by your white slave owners, then we should have a piece of that wealth. It's only fair. But the problem is that's the whole concept of generational wealth here is absolutely just dumb. It's a myth. Generational wealth does not pass that long, 3 generations at max.
Mhm.
But considering the whole historical context, it's pretty much impossible. So like 5% of white Southern slaves are 5% of white Southerners own slaves in the Deep South. Now, considering that, it only takes one dumb person to ruin your generational wealth. And where
Right.
was all the uneducated people? In the South. And they had to go through multiple depressions with that wealth. The likelihood of that wealth being here today is absolutely minuscule. And it's minuscule for you to even find a white person in America today who even owns slaves. I mean, the whole concept of that you can even profit off of slavery is just irrational off the jump. It's because you can't make wealth by enslaving other people's minds. You can only make wealth by doing consensual agreements and allowing them their mind to flourish and produce certain material products.
Right. So that's kind of what I was thinking. I was like, well, maybe you could argue, like, let's say back in the day, so someone owned a slave. You could try to make the case that that guy's son or multiple kids, if they inherit his wealth, like maybe you would try to like argue that they owe something if they like just like there was no like that wealth was not transformed in any way. They literally just inherited it, and you can prove that that wealth was like from made off the backs of slaves. But then like after all these generations, like it just there's so many variables like like it's gonna get lost, so many things. Like you explained it perfectly. But in this episode we see somebody like trying to make that argument. This lady Shaniqua, she wants $3 million from this barely middle class dude. He has like a small bachelor apartment. And like, how did she arrive to the number 3 million? Like, how could someone like her prove? Is there a way to prove? I mean, you already said no, but like, chime in.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's any rational way to sit there and prove, like, one, that this person's ancestors enslaved my ancestors. And two, even if you could prove that, you would have to prove that the wealth that exists today with that white person was a derivative from the wealth of his ancestors. And even if you could have proved that, again, the white guy in the show has absolutely no obligation to send any money to her because he's not his grandfather. He's not his great 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 grandfather. It's not that you inherit this ancestral sin or anything like that. And I think like the implicit philosophy here is that they treat race as its own being, right? It's not the individuals and people who act. It's actually the race. So if your race does X, Y, and Z, so you must be a part of X, Y, and Z. And it's like that's not how it operates at all. You got to treat people as individuals.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So one of the things that struck me, like a lot of the parts in the episode, I was like very shook because they were like scary, but there was also some like sad moments. One of them was when Marshall, the white guy, picks up his daughter from school and she's really quiet, and he asks her like, "What's wrong?" And she, is this like 9-year-old little girl who's never done anything wrong to anybody in her life, and she's really sad because somebody at school says her family is racist. So now she thinks like, am I racist? Are we racist? Dad, are you racist? Like that struck me a lot, just to that she has to like deal with this unearned guilt. We love to use that concept of unearned guilt, that they expect her to feel like she's a bad person for something she didn't do.
I mean, it's even worse than that. It's unearned collectivized guilt. I mean, if it's blatant in what the daughter is saying is, are we racist? Who is we? Like, you don't sit there, you don't inherit any of like the moral status of your great grandparents or any of that, and nor should you. You should conclude and judge whether your grandparents were good based on the individual actions, not just because of your grandparents or whatever.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that was a very intense moment, but there were also some funny things that happened. And this one, I don't know, I don't have much to say about this, but I just want to get your thoughts if you have any opinions. In the episode, Marshall, well, after he finds out that he's being sued, he finds out that other people of other coworkers are also being sued. And instead of giving money, the people suing them, there's this one guy in particular who they told this guy, like, you don't have to pay us money. We just want you to acknowledge your racist slave owning past. and he has to wear this black shirt with big white letters that says, "I owned slaves," and he has to wear it twice a week, once during work and then on another day on Sundays. Like, I'm just like, he didn't own slaves. Like, why does he have to wear this shirt? Like, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, again, I mean, this is just kind of rehashing, previous concepts I was bringing up, but just the whole concept of saying "I" on the T-shirt, it's like it's contradictory, because no, he didn't own slaves. Like, slavery is illegal nowadays. But the whole concept of that, well, you still have to pay for your white ancestors, and that's why we're going to make you wear this shirt saying "I own slaves." Like, it's a contradiction.
Right. There were some other intense moments, and there was this part where Marshall, because he's being harassed by this lady who just like stationed herself outside his house, he has to go to this hotel to hide. Well, I mean, but he's hoping things will cool down, but they never do. So he goes to this hotel and he meets this other white dude that's there on the same boat. But this guy has a different point of view, a different attitude. Marshall's telling him like, what am I supposed to do? I didn't do anything. I don't think I'm guilty, responsible, and I don't even have money. Like, this is ruining my life. And then the other guy says something that was very deep. Like, it actually like made me be like, oh, is he onto something? Basically, he explains that, oh, for white people and for anybody who's not Black, the concept of slavery is this like curiosity that we don't really understand because it didn't happen to our ancestors. So we are trying to like forget about it, and we'll just never understand it. It's never going to impact us in the same way that it does Black people. He says that to Black people, it is very, very a real thing, even if it hasn't happened to them. The fact that they know that it happened to their ancestors is very impactful. Kind of like the same argument you could say for Jewish people. Like, Jewish people might be traumatized that even though they've never been persecuted, that their ancestors were like sent to the Holocaust and all those things, right? And so that actually made me think. I was like, well, like he has a point there, but I was thinking like, I don't think that's still that, to acknowledge that doesn't mean that it still makes Black people entitled to try to get reparations from white people who they themselves haven't done anything. What are your thoughts?
Are you aware of the concept of PTSD?
Yes.
Okay, so this is what I
post-traumatic stress disorder.
Yes.
Okay.
And then I call this the fallacy of PTSD. It's not post-traumatic stress disorder, but it's post-traumatic slave disorder.
Oh.
And it's this whole entire idea that like psychological like mishaps or something like that can somehow transfer down ancestral lineage. And that's why you hear people like nowadays, it's like, my people, we've been enslaved, we've been dealing with you people, white people, blah blah blah, for thousands or 400 years and something like that. And it's frustrating, it's tiring, and it's like, who is we? Like, you're living in America. Those slaves that existed 150 years ago don't even know you exist. So this whole concept of like, there's like, I don't know. I like to envision the Avatar. Like, I don't know if you watched like Aang the Avatar, but it's like the Avatar has like multiple bloodlines before them, and they can speak telepathically or something like that.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, that's what I think it is. Like, I'm like telepathically, consciously speaking to my ancestors, and they're injecting all their thoughts in my head or something like that. And I just find the whole entire concept ridiculous.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I think a lot of it has to do with like how much leverage you can get out of making people believe that this is a real thing. Because, for example, I'm Mexican, right? And like, Mexico has a past of, they were colonized, the Spaniards came, also rape and pillage, they colonized the natives. But for some reason, Mexicans don't really like to leverage this as like, we're victims of the Spaniards. So we don't really think about that. In Mexico, it's not like a thing that we feel like, oh, we have this traumatizing past. For the most part, most Mexicans don't think that way. So in a way, I think it's, now that you think about it, it might be just like a way to try to, by selling this idea, you can get some leverage out of it in present day.
Yeah, it's a lot of gaslighting, it's a lot of guilt tripping. And I mean, people know this, and that's kind of why they're pushing this whole idea of like critical race theory nowadays, which I'm working on a project on, and soon. But they'll like inject critical race theory in like the work businesses, create a whole entire like racial commotion, and this would force like the business owners to sit there and have like a meeting with all the employees, and say, well, since there's been a racial mishap or something like that, let's go ahead and have this racial meeting. And then that's when they talk about like, well, racism and level down your whiteness and stuff like that. So it's ridiculous.
Right. Okay, let's talk about this, but we might cut it because obviously you might not have anything to say about it. But there's also this interesting part at the very beginning of the episode where you think it has nothing to do with the story, but I'm kind of like thinking like, I think they're trying to say something. And at the very beginning of the episode, Marshall, the white guy, I have to say, it's at a coffee shop with his AirPods or whatever on. He's just listening to music. He's in the queue in the line waiting for his turn to order coffee. And he's just listening to music. He's tuning out the world. And he sees these Madeline cookies, the ones you see at a Starbucks. And he's just like, he's considering like, should I buy them? But before he can like make a decision, he's like interrupted because he hears like somebody saying like, it's your turn. And when he goes up to their cash register, he sees that he didn't see what happened, but for some reason the cashier is telling this black guy to go away. Like maybe he jumped the line or something. And so Marshall's like, oh, what happened? And he orders his coffee. And when he gets to his car, he notices that he stole the cookies. Like maybe when he was like talking to the cashier, he put them in his pocket by accident. And then he's like, oh, he has like a moment where he might be thinking like, should I go back inside and pay for them? But he's probably like, oh, they're $2. Like, and I didn't do it on purpose. And he just eats them. Right. So I was trying to read into it because when as a filmmaker, you never put anything in a story unless it's part of the story, unless it's like an element of storytelling. I studied filmmaking. Anyways, so I was thinking like, what is this supposed to be about? And in trying to read into it, I thought that maybe they were trying to say like, this white guy is so white, that he was able to literally steal something out of a store because of his white privilege. Nobody like takes a second look at him. And yet this other black guy just got mistreated at the coffee shop. I just thought that was an interesting thing. And I don't really know what they were trying to say with that, because that's happened to me before. Like I taken things out of a store by accident that I wasn't meaning to steal. I just like walked out of them and I was like, oh no, I walked out of the store with it. So I don't really know what they were going. Did you have any thoughts on that?
I mean, I think this might be they're trying to go around like along the lines of racially profiling in stores. Like, oh, there's a black guy that came in my store, he's going to steal something. And I've seen many people try to argue systemic racism with me, and they'll bring up studies or something like that. Like, yeah, like racial profiling does happen in stores, and here's the statistics. And it's like, well, there's so many variables that you're missing out. Like, it really depends on like what type of area that you're in. Because again, if I'm in a really bad area, it's not just the race that's going to play a variable. It's literally the environment, what type of clothes that you're wearing, how you're acting around me. And if you're sitting there going like this, looking at me like, bro, you're about to steal something, come on now.
Right. That's interesting. You mentioned racial profiling, and that made me think, I think that's exactly why they put it in the story, to show us Marshall's world, like how unaware of his privilege he is. Like to him, it's such a meaningless thing. Like, oh, I took some cookies by accident and nothing happens. But they're telling us like he doesn't know like the implications of this small action and why he was able to get away with it. So that's another, like, the filmmakers are very smart. I obviously do not agree with like their messages in this episode, but I admire their like subtle storytelling and like trying to sell this idea, so this like giving this social commentary. So let's go to the ending, which is it's just crazy. I want to get your thoughts on that, but here's what I saw. Basically, after Marshall sees that guy kill himself, we cut to the future, right? And he is now working in a restaurant as a waiter. For some reason, he lost his job. We don't know if it's related to the lawsuit he was under or to something else, but he has a new job as a waiter, which is obviously a lower job than his office job. And not only that, at the end of every week, he has to go report to his manager and relinquish a percentage of his paycheck as reparations tax. And it's going specifically to the person who sued him, which was Shaniqua something. I don't remember her last name. And he's giving out 15% out of his paycheck every paycheck. And but the funny part is that they show him as like, I'm okay with this. I am content. I even like my coworkers, and I'm just gonna go about my day. This is just the way it is. I feel like even though they presented Marshall as this like person that we relate to, that we feel sorry about, the filmmakers are also trying to say like, yeah, he might be a nice guy, but he needs to pay for his sins. And you see, he's not that bad. He
He
still has a
became
job.
woke towards the end. He became very woke.
Yeah, and you see, he's enjoying it. He chats with his coworkers. It's not that bad. Like if this was a feature, it wouldn't be too bad, right? Your thoughts?
Oh man. So I mean, Shaniqua has no political or moral right to that money whatsoever, as previously explained. And I think the whole entire, I mean, when you really think about it, like these people, I find it interesting that these people are so concerned with just the money aspect. But if anybody has watched the show, like Shaniqua spent multiple days of just following this guy in her car. Like if she was a rational person, she would have not spent all that gas money following this guy, and she would just invest it in other things. But yet she wants to steal it from this white guy, but you're sitting there wasting money. Like that doesn't make any sense. But yeah, towards the end, yeah, the marshal, the white guy, was just sitting there serving a whole bunch of black people and stuff like that. And to me, I see this not only as a sacrifice, which is to me is very immoral. You shouldn't sacrifice. But I think this is even worse because he's not sacrificing just to individuals that he believes that has a moral right to his time or his life, but he's sacrificing himself to a race, to a whole bunch of black people that the chances of them being enslaved, their ancestors or something like that, probably wasn't that high. Do you know they were enslaved? I have no idea, but I know they're black and they're in my restaurant, so I have some type of obligation to serve them. And I just find this whole idea of just racial sacrificing ridiculous.
Yeah. And okay, so one more thing I wanted to bring up is that obviously in this episode, what happens in this episode, or at least to my knowledge, none of this has ever happened in real life. And obviously this is a very like over the top scenario, like that people could just look you up and say, oh, your family owns slaves and I'm gonna sue you. Very far-fetched, and yet the ideas behind it are very real and like very important to some people. What have you observed? Like, do you believe there's like a giant amount of people that really believe this should be like if they saw this episode, do you think they would like vote for it, for some system like this?
Absolutely. Oh yeah, I think there's tons, more than enough people that would like support this idea.
More than enough?
Of more than enough that would support
no.
this idea of reparation. Far as from what I've seen, who I've talked to, debated, the whole 9 yards. And I think that a part of the movie messaging is that, well, reparations is pretty rational, but you don't have to go over the top like Shaniqua in the movie. Don't be that irrational. Don't go on white people's property and treat it like your own, blah, blah, blah. But the concept of reparation is pretty valid. We should institute it, but not the way that the movie is doing it. And I think if you try to grant any validity to the idea of reparations, I mean, you're just going to fall flat right on your face because there is no like validity of it. Again, considering the whole entire historical context, I don't think there's not enough room to sit there and prove what they're trying to prove in the movie. And additionally, even if you could buy, superpowers and magic, that again, it doesn't obliterate the concept of collectivized guilt. That guy has no obligation to give you his money.
Mm-hmm. Well, those were the topics that I had prepared. But is there anything else that you would like to discuss, bring up?
Considering I'm working on the project now, and I think reparations is kind of the background in imagery of it, I guess. A lot of what's going, I don't know if you know a lot about it, but critical race theory, people like Kindy X, Crenshaw, D'Angelo, White Fragility. I think a lot of those books that are playing a role today kind of influence and probably motivate people to support like reparations as well.
And this project that you're working on, is it like a video thing, an article, book? What is it?
It is a video. It's essentially how critical race theory creates more racism. Most people are just making videos about like, oh, critical race theory is racist. Like, okay, to a rational viewer, like that makes sense. Obviously, that's kind of common sense. But like, can you conceptually think about like how it will logically lead to more racism in America? And I think there are a lot of examples of that. I mean, we can just take a look at Leonard Peikoff's ominous parallels and the rising of Nazi Germany and things like that.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, before we end this video, and first of all, thank you so much because the discussion was great. I love hearing your thoughts on it. But also, what's the next video you're going to be releasing on your channel so people can be on the lookout?
It will be that critical race theory video. Okay. Anything after that will just be pertaining to political, cultural, some live streams about some crazy video we found online, and we're probably going to react to it. I don't know. I don't have my channel systematically planned out, but I just know the most recent video I'm going to publish soon is that critical race theory video.
And you are also on other platforms. You are on Instagram, but more importantly, you are on TikTok, right?
I am. The TikTok community is we're not so fond of the TikTok community anymore. We kind of swayed away. We're trying to just work on the YouTube primarily. So if you want more information on us, just stick with the YouTube. It's not necessary for you to go on a TikTok.
Okay, well, I am going to link to all of your platforms anyway in the description so people can go follow you and subscribe and all of that. And yeah, I think this was all we had to say about this video, but please feel free to chime in with your thoughts. Even if you haven't watched the episode Atlanta, which is called the Big Payback, if you have thoughts on reparations, you can leave them as a comment, or if you did see the episode, also leave us your comments. But yeah, that was all, and thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
All right, so that was the end of that conversation. I had a great time, but I need to go outside and get some air. There's no AC here. You can see my red face. But before closing, I just wanted to say that I love Atlanta. That's a show that, okay, I'm not like, I don't love it more than The Office, obviously. But, it's a really fun show. And it has a bunch of one-off episodes that have very little to do with the main storyline, right? The main storyline is these rappers in Atlanta trying to make it. But there are a bunch of like one-off episodes. They'll follow the story of other characters that have nothing to do with the main story, like as in the case of the Big Payback. So actually, a lot of the episodes in Atlanta are promoting ideas that I completely disagree with, yet they present them in such a way that it's very entertaining to watch, and I watch, right? And I love watching it, right? For example, one of the previous episodes before this one, it was a story about this little boy who gets pulled into the foster care system by accident, even though he doesn't need to. He has a mom that cares for him, but he has this like school counselor thinks he's being abused at home, or anyway, she puts him in the foster care system, and he ends up in this white family that two white lesbians that like adopt black kids. And that episode was hilarious. I don't necessarily agree with all the social commentary in that episode. I agree with some of it a little bit, but I'm not gonna get into that. But for the most part, I disagree. But it was hilarious because these poor white ladies, everybody in that episode that was white was made out to seem completely retarded. Like all these white people were portrayed as retarded, which was hilarious for the episode. I was laughing, but also I was like, that's fucked up. Like everybody. So like I said, I do not necessarily agree with all the social commentary, but I still find it very funny. And I will continue to watch Atlanta and see if they come up with any crazy episodes. Anyways, that was it for this video. I'm gonna go get some air. I'm melting. And thanks for watching. Please subscribe and like, and I'll see you on the next one.